Okay, so what I want to give you in this little guide is a bit of a walkthrough example of how we can use the controls in different ways. Everyone likes to pose and work with a rig in different ways, and different people find different types of controls natural to use. The RH rigs offer various options within the control systems for how you might want to handle your keys and your offsets together with one another over the course of an animation, as well as where things like IK, FK, and the inbuilt automatic controllers that let you puppet little parts of a character can all be used together throughout the course of an animation. Some of the first things we're going to want to look at are the following. That's optimizing our character for animation work, or rather optimizing Lightwave. We want to make sure that we've got threaded mesh eval turned on, that we've got FSPE turned off. GL, make sure that motion paths are turned off. You can toggle them on as you work because they are useful, but for working, keep them off. In CS, make sure that your color correct OpenGL is turned off. With your character itself, keep it to a low subdivision level, of course. And also, if you happen to have any morphs on it from Morph Mixer, you can toggle that off by unchecking it. And that will also give you a speed boost when you're animating the body and don't need the morphs to be active. You can also go to the Deform rig now, select any of the joints, bring up the properties, and turn on faster bones. This changes ever so slightly how the bones influence the mesh. And with faster bones on, everything runs a little bit faster. Whether or not you want this on or off for render will depend on your different characters. So make sure to set it as you need, but keeping it on for the Deform rig is a good thing to do whilst animating. And so like that, with our scene optimized best for animating, we're ready to begin, with everything working pretty smoothly in our viewport. So what we're going to be doing in this walkthrough is to take a look at how we can use the controllers on the RH rig and different ways of setting and keying them, in the use of an animation. Now, everyone always says, let's start out with something simple like a walk cycle, and walk cycles ain't always that simple. Now, we're not going to get into different, types or methods of walk cycling, but what we are going to see is that it provides a excellent sort of context to examine the kinds of options that we can use in terms of animating the rig that we have. So, I've just got the beginnings of a walk cycle in here, just a simple boom, 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 like that. Let me just center on you. There we go. Simple little repeat here. We are jumping straight in, but just for the basics that we've got here. The feet, of course, are spaced apart, forwards and backwards. So we're starting out at this contact pose, and I've rotated the IK nulls out here a bit to put the feet on, a bit of an angle there. On this contacting foot, I've just pushed the IK foot controller back on the Z there to bring it into the contact position, and this one I've just got in the opposing toe lift position simply by having that moved up on the Y there. Root's tilted forward so ever so slightly, and all I've done is just set a bunch of keys where these poses alternate, and that's all the keying that I've done so far. There's also one other little thing I've done, which is the root offset. If we view from the front, we can see that as he walks, his hips do this little side-to-side motion, which you normally would expect to get. I could, of course, have keyed that on the root itself. I could have keyed its X channel, and in a lot of situations that's probably what you would do, because it keeps all of the curves on a single item. But straight away, to show one option, I've got that working on the root offset item, the side-to-side motion. And what that gives me in this case is isolation, so I can more easily offset these keys if I'm wanting to from the key positions of the root or so on. What this means, of course, is so far at this beginning stage of animation, the only channel that has got any change happening on it on the root item is just the Z as it moves forwards in the scene space. So the first thing that we're going to do now that we've got this basic, step key motion in there on the legs is we're going to look at the whole in between of what we get. We're just on basic linear keys here, and we can see that it's a little bit crappy. So first thing that I want to notice is what's happening with the raising foot in my walk cycle. At the moment my foot is coming straight forward from that point, which is wrong. I want him to lift up onto the tip toes a bit first as he comes a bit forward, and then the foot lifts and starts to move. So with this foot IK here selected, I'm going to copy its pose, or its key, and paste it in again 2 later, actually maybe more than that, 4 later, let's say. And then at this frame 5, we're going to come completely off Y, so go down to Y0, which of course loses the up on toes move. We're going to push forwards on the Z to come up on tiptoes like this. You see here, we've gone into the back forward on the Z there. We can say that we're going to come up this high and then our foot is going to start to move to the contact there. Okay? And we can see that that little overlap as it goes from Y up to Y nothing and the Z comes forward there works nicely and the toes curl off the ground. So what I'm going to decide here is that I'm happy with that 4-frame spacing that I've got going on there. So what I'm going to do now is every time that foot is supposed to stay in contact with the ground, as in here, I'm going to grab that frame and I'm just going to shift it 1, 2, 3, 4 further along. And of course I go and do that for the other foot. So what we now get is a foot that sticks a little bit longer before lifting. So having done that for both feet, I of course take care of the little bit of animation there from Y to Z positioning on the IK foot control, and there what we see we get is the little toe lift coming up as we go along. That's grand. Now the next thing we're going to want to have a look at is what happens after the contact point here. So I'm going to say it's going to come down from the heel. I think 2 frames is probably enough for that. Reset value, so it's 0 on everything. There we are, nice flat foot. And we also want to look at the point where it starts to raise up onto the toe, so how long it stays completely flat for. It takes 4 frames to come up onto the tiptoe, so maybe 4 is good. Hit reset value again. That gives us a nice smooth timing between those 2 keys there. So we just go and do that. 1, 2, reset value. 1, 2, 3, 4, reset value. And we do it for both feet. So there we are. We've got this whole walking motion going on there with just a handful of keyframes. And he's okay on the old playback there. The foot action is working reasonably well. Now what we've just been through so far is, in this rig of ours, probably the easiest base to have for your walk cycle keys for these main parts doing their bits and pieces. There are other optional ways that you could have got these motions going on in the foot. But for this particular part of the mechanic, the contact down and the lift off, they don't really work so well. What we're going to start looking at now are much more options for how you can use the controls in different ways. We're going to start looking at the actual lift in between. So the first foot doing the lift off is the old right leg here. Okay, so let's see the different ways that we could perhaps key the passing on this. When this foot does its pass, from back to front position, it needs to have a motion arc. The ankle needs to take something of an arced motion. And there's a few ways that we can control that. First thing we can do is we can look to our IKFK controls. So for instance here, in this case frame 5, this is the last frame where the foot is really doing an IK contact to the ground. After this it's lifted up, we expect. So what we could do is select the FK controllers for the leg here, key it all the way down, come to the contact pose, so the next point when it's going to be in IK contact, in this case here, frame 15, key them all again. Then we could quite simply here at 5 make sure that the right leg is keyed into IK, make sure the same is at 15, but then one before, so 14, we come to full FK, and one after the leaving, which will be frame 6, we come to full FK. So now the in between there is a fully FK action. One thing of note, having done a switch like that, we need to go into the envelopes here because we can see, sorry you can't see, graph editor on another monitor. As we can see, even though whatever default behavior we're set to in the graph editor options, the curves will always come out as TCB splines, so we set them back to linear. Okay, so there we have an FK move happening on the in-between, so we can quite simply then just grab these and in the in-between bit go, okay, you can come up, this much, and you can, start to pull forward like this, and you can go sort of there-ish, and I can flop the toe down if I want to, and blah blah blah. Get another little in-between move there, bring the thigh up more, can key up my pass like that. That gives me a lot of control, good way to get good arcs, to get difference lift between when the thigh lifts and when the knee pushes out to extend, because if you study walks there is a sort of an offset there between when the thigh starts coming down and when the lower leg pushes out from the knee and so on. So that's one way of doing it, and there you go. The thing to remember if you do it this way is how you need to rekey the changes if you change anything else. For instance here, at the moment, apart from that side to side that he's doing on the old offset control, there's no roll happening in the hips at this point. Maybe I will yet come in and start adding a bit of roll to the hip, which, as we can see, has affected the IK solution for the leg there. If I do end up doing that and I have keyed off to FK, then I need to come back in to those final IK keys here before the switch and rekey my FK controllers so as they update the rotation that's stored at that frame, which is of course important for the interpolation between what the FK data stored at this frame and of course our next hand keyed in between. And of course the same we have to do for the out here, you see, to take care of any changes in that regard. Okay, but there we see straight away there's one method for working out the in-between and one way of crossing over from one type of control system that we're using to another one. Right, so having done that, our next foot is about to lift off, so let's look at another option that we could have. Well, I could just key the IK goal, couldn't I? I could just come into my passing pose somewhere around here, and I could just take the IK goal there and I could rotate it a bit and move it up like this and just like that to create my passing pose, and do it that way. That's quick and easy. See, that works pretty well. So I could do it like that. Nice and straightforward. Other option, of course, I could have just allowed this main IK goal to keep scooting straight and flat across the ground there, and I could have instead grabbed the IK offset, keyed its in and out positions there, and then gone and given it an in between here to work from, and do it that way. Also, if I'm using either of those two methods where I'm basically moving the IK goal to create the in between, then don't forget that the IK ankle, the final goal, is exposed on the RH rig, and you can manipulate that as well in this fashion, you see. So I could key its in point and its out point, and I can still tween it a little bit, creating additional movement which, as you can see, targets into the actual IK goal space. The toes still and the foot roll still reacts within the own space of this whole thing. Or of course, if we look back at our right foot, which is just about to leave again, then I could even try and use that IK goal there at the ankle position as my sole method, try and do whatever I want with the foot at that in-between stage. If I'm trying to view the motion back, then I can select either this IK ankle control or even the FK ankle control, and in GL I can turn on the motion paths, and this lets me see the kind of arc that I'm getting. We can see that in this case the manipulation of the IK ankle itself and nothing else hasn't proved particularly successful. If we look back, we can see that the FK that I did before has given us a very nice arc there from the ankle. Check out the one on the other side where we've used a combination of the IK goal and the IK ankle. We can see that it's a little imperfect there, but also of course this is because we are on linear frames, and so that straight line can easily be smoothed with a curve in Graph Editor. And then we come on to yet another option, which we can see here on our last push forward, which is where we use the IK foot controller to do a lot of the foot tilt and so on. So up here we'll keep it quite high up, for instance, and over here we'll start to move it back a lot more like that. and again just for the straight up down of it I can use the IK offset here to simply just lift it all off the ground as it does that IK foot control based turn. Looking pretty terrible here, and probably the worst option for getting a good motion on your in-between. But those are the main options that you've got available. So hopefully this gives you a good heads up on using the RH rigs, the different ways that you can approach using the controllers for the animation that is you're trying to achieve.